Although I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas, this podcast is not therapy and should not be used as therapeutic intervention. Many of the products and practices mentioned are for educational and informational purposes only. Should you need support, please seek appropriate, qualified, and licensed professionals. Hey y'all, welcome to Between a Hot Mess and a Therapist, the podcast where we navigate the murky waters between what society expects and what it means to truly live, embrace the messiness, the beautiful chaos of life, and celebrating the rebellion in the process. Whether you're a recent graduate, a seasoned therapist, or someone just curious, there's something here for everyone. But before we dive in, make sure you join the Hot Mess Rebellion community where you can connect to other like-minded souls. I'm your host, Shauna Lovin, a seasoned therapist and wellness educator with a very rebellious spirit. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's rebellion. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Between a Hot Mess and a Therapist. Today we are talking about burnout. Now y'all know this is one topic that we as therapists or helping professionals, we talk about this one all the time. You know, it's kind of interesting because as much as we talk about it, it seems like more people or more therapists are still experiencing this. And it's just amazing how maybe as a collective, we need to figure out how to, I can't say we can fix it, but how we can maybe manage it a little bit better. The reason why I bring this topic up today is because a lot of us are dealing with things like stress and anxiety, depression. Some of us may be drinking too much. We may have some memory or cognitive problems. Transference is huge in this space, as well as there are some people that are contemplating or thinking about suicide. And, you know, it's kind of hard to imagine that as a therapist, you should really have your shit together because you're a therapist. Remember, we have the magic wand. But in reality, we have our own stuff that we're dealing with and that we have to be able to work through. The other piece about this is that we have all experienced trauma, and we know that trauma is something that can eventually lead to PTSD, but that's only 20% of the population where that actually happens. But trauma is a real thing. It's big, it's small. Don't forget that we have ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, where all of us have experienced at least one of those. I don't care what you say or what you think. We've all experienced at least one of those. I know that I have. And so all these things put together and what's happening in our personal life can lead to burnout. Now, here's the interesting thing. I did a workshop recently on burnout with some newer therapists or associates, and it was just kind of heartening to see some of these stats that I was able to find. Thank you to Simple Practice, not that they're sponsoring this, but they actually did a more recent survey compared to some other things that are out there, as well as the APA had something in 2022. And then SAMHSA had something that was around the same time, 2022, 2023. But the stats are saying that about 52% of therapists are experiencing burnout within the last year. Now, let's put that in a little bit of perspective. There are about 200,000 therapists in the United States, licensed. I'm not talking about, doctors or whatever. I'm talking about licensed therapists. And when you look at the numbers, about half of that are experiencing burnout. That's a lot. The other thing that came up was about 29% are currently burnt out. 49% say that it got worse since COVID. And I think I might agree with that one. 60% say, these are the reasons that why they feel their burnout kind of came about. 60% say it was the work-life balance. Remember, balance is not ideal. It should be a blend. 55% say it was just the admin task. 54% say it's compassion fatigue. 44% say low pay. I can agree with that one too, because starting out as a therapist and until you can find your footing and you move your way up or you can find better paying jobs, it's a low paying job. We did not get into this for the money. I will say that. 33% say that it's because of the severity or complexity of some of the client needs. 25% say that it's too many clients, too high caseloads. So you got too many people that you're working with. And then 8% of the people say that it's challenges through navigating licensure. I know that a lot of states make that difficult. I'm grateful for being here in Texas because they're trying to make it better, but they still have a ways to go for sure. So some of the things that are coming out of these studies was that, outside of the workload or the control that a person has actually at work, the reward system maybe through work, the community through work, that these things, when they're not in a good place, they lead to job satisfaction or dissatisfaction. There's a high turnover rate, and then there's absenteeism. Now, I'm talking about all the people that actually work for someone, but there's also a difference between those that work for themselves in private practice or they have something that's kind of outside. And if you're like me, I have a full-time job where I work 10 to 7 currently. That is my current schedule. It's nice because it is Monday through Friday, but nevertheless, it's 10 to 7. And then oftentimes anything that I do with my private practice either comes before that or after that. And so there are many days where I am staying up until 10 o'clock because I saw a client, I'm working with associates, you got to do a couple of notes. And then by the time that I'm done with all those things, I immediately go into a nighttime routine so that I can kind of reset myself. By the time all that is done, it's 10 o'clock before my head hits that pillow. So this is just to say that we have to find other ways to kind of balance or not even balance, but other ways to manage the things that are coming in, the energy that we are expending in our daily working, professional, personal life. We have to watch our energy. A couple other interesting stats that came up were 86% of people say that they are engaging in self-care, but they're still experiencing burnouts. How is that even possible? Like, you're doing the things that you need to do to manage yourself, but you're still burnt out. Like, that just doesn't compute in my brain. And I think I have a theory for that, but that's something we can talk about another day. 57% of therapists plan to leave the field in the next 5 years. I'm pretty sure all of us have considered it at some point, but 57% are saying that they're actually out. Peace. I'm done. Holla back. So that's interesting, especially as a new therapist coming into the field. That's kind of disheartening to hear, just because you've gone to school, you've done all this work, you get started into the field. It took you freaking forever to get the hours done. You're in the field, you're working, you're seeing clients, and then to only take a quick exit maybe 5 years after you get the ball rolling. And so I don't know about you, but I've been around about 12 years and I have definitely considered leaving. However, I think another way that some people maybe last longer than that 5-year span is that we start finding other things to do to harness our skills. And we use our skill set in a different way. So those were just some of the stats. And burnout really is more than just feeling tired. It's really feeling utterly spent, emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. And it's really just due to prolonged stress. Now, remember, we have stress every day. It comes, it waves, it's up, it's down, it's right, it's left, but we all are experiencing these things. And so when we have our own personal things that we're dealing with, then we have to consider, how does my personal experience translate into working with my clients or with my associates or whoever I'm working with? How does that translate? Am I experiencing more stress, anxiety, depression? And then am I transferring whatever the heck is going on with me to my clients, or counter transference, vice versa? Like, because we can get triggered by our clients, whatever they're dealing with, because we are working with them probably in the worst time in their life and they're trying to get it together. They come to you for help, and then whatever they're dealing with gets dropped on you. So be mindful that even though you might have your shit together in many ways, your client's shit that gets dumped on you may not help you feel at your best. It may lead to burnout, because essentially that is what secondary trauma is. It is hearing your client's shit, and you are experiencing that because they're coming to you for help. So it's about understanding all these components that lead to burnout eventually. So the interesting thing is that in this workshop, one of the questions that came up was like, have I, Shauna, personally experienced burnout? And so the story kind of goes is that I, became licensed 12 years ago, and I became a supervisor a few years after that. But all this time I had a full-time job. I have always worked a full-time job. Why? I don't know. Maybe because the idea of full-time work was what has been ingrained in us. And the other piece is that, my husband is very concrete in his thinking, and he has to see like, hey, you go to work every day and you get income from your work. And so that kind of played a little bit of a role on why I've always had a full-time job. But so some time had passed before I actually decided to dive into, working with associates. And it had been a few years after becoming a supervisor before I did that, because I kind of felt like I wasn't ready, but at the same time, or I didn't have enough experience. And then I just kind of decided, okay, I'm going to move into this, because what is one way to learn what to do or how to function is to actually just jump in. And so I decided to jump in. And then it wasn't until when COVID started that I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I should really be seeing clients, because we have a lot going on in our world and we have people that need help. And so I started seeing clients. And it was quickly within, I think, the first year, I realized that seeing individual clients is not necessarily what I like to do. Now, I like helping people for sure. I am quick to do a quick assessment, do a quick referral, do a quick something to help you find your footing, get on your way. And in the process of realizing that I really didn't want to do individual counseling anymore, that I was more of a teacher by nature. And I noticed that I was teaching my clients in some ways and kind of teaching them through their issues and problems that they came with. And they were actually grateful for that, and they're okay with that. But at the same time, it's not where I mentally wanted to be. And I found myself being fully exhausted and overwhelmed because I'm doing all these things. People said, oh my goodness, you're working like a Jamaican because you got all these jobs. And, it's just, it was a lot. And it still is a lot, because you have to think about, like, not only was I working full time, I was seeing associates, I was working with clients. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, we have a house, we have dogs. Like, It's just all the things. And when you become mentally responsible for a lot of different things in a lot of different areas, you don't always know that you were burnt out. And so for a long time, I had no idea that I was actually burnt out. I had no idea. I was just going through daily life like everything was fine, like everything was just peachy. And then one day, just in the midst of me trying to, maybe do coaching or try to figure out where I wanted to direct my practice, I realized as I started researching some other things and I got back into, the polyvagal theory, and then human design came on. And in between that, I realized that I was not using my energy well. I also realized, especially with the polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, that all the things you need to do to activate your vagus nerve, I used to do all the time. Like that was me, dancing in the kitchen and singing in the car and I was like, that was me. And then in the process of all that, I'm like, wait a minute. If I'm not doing all these things to kind of keep the energy moving and flowing, and if I'm not doing my best at resting enough, having good rest, then I was burnt out. I really was. And then the moment that I realized that, and then I moved back into doing the dancing, the singing, the stretching, the yoga, the walking, and having my non-negotiables when it came to self-care, the moment that I started doing that, bam, things changed. I was better. Things just started to move and look up. And so I say this because even though it's burnout is talked about a lot in the community, we all experience it in different ways. And your symptoms of what that could look like could be very different. And so I would say reach out to your fellow neighbor, therapist, your favorite first responder, and just gently tell them, like, hey, you're doing too much. I think you should take a break. Because sometimes we don't see it, but other people do, and other people recognize it. And if I had taken the cues like you're working too much as a cue, I would have recognized a long time ago that I was burnt out. So find your community, find your tribe. Think about, if you can't do anything else to manage yourself and your burnout, I would say manage your central nervous system through the vagus nerve. Do that every day, all day. This is like the crazy embodiment of self-care because you're being intentional about what you're doing and how you're managing yourself. The other thing that I would say is learn to live outside of the box. Challenge the status quo, because self-care does not have to look or feel a certain way. If that means you're freaking dancing naked in your living room and you're watching your guilty pleasure for TV, then do it. Be outside of the box. Another thing is, again, lean into your support system, because we don't have to do this by ourselves. Make sure you reach out to family, friends, other therapists who can maybe support you along the way or give you an encouraging word or remind you that you need to take care of yourself, because connections create joy, creativity, and enhances our spirituality. The last thing that I would really consider when it comes to managing burnout is boundaries. Like, set them things like a boss. I mean, learn to say no without feeling guilty, and protect your time, protect your energy, and use the resources that you have to manage your time and space and energy. The thing about boundaries we have to remember is that the boundary is not for the other person. The boundary is for you. So whatever rule, guideline that you set for yourself, stick to it, because the boundaries is what's going to help you keep moving forward. Your time is valuable, and you really decide how you want to spend that. No one else dictates your priorities. So remember, on this journey of radical self-discovery that we have, and in this rebellion against the forces that try to dim our light, remember that embodiment, we reclaim our power, our authenticity, and our unwavering spirit of this rebellion that we're on. Remember that culturally, things can be different. So you always want to keep that in mind and how that looks. It can look different. Remember to embody your truth, your strength, and your unapologetic self. Until next time, thanks for joining me on this ride. Thanks for joining today's rebellion with me. Remember, it's okay to be a hot mess sometimes. It's all part of the journey. Until next time, stay rebellious, stay authentic, and keep embracing the beautiful messiness of life. Don't forget to join the Hot Mess Rebellion community where you can connect with other like-minded souls. And anything mentioned in today's episode will be linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe, you share with a friend, you leave a review, and you keep coming back for more. This podcast was brought to you by Healing Roots Wellness and Botanicals. For more information, please visit healingrootswab.com.